Happy Halloween, guys! The Horror Man back on the final day of the 31 Days of Horror. Because, well, after all, it's Halloween. As you know, this year my theme for the 31 Days of Horror was Sleepy Halloween. Over the course of this month, I reviewed 4 movies based on the legend of Sleepy Hollow. I had a few different ideas of what to do for today, the most important day of all of the 31 Days of Horror, Halloween. I really felt it needed to be something Sleepy Halloween related, though. I could have reviewed Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, but that's too easy. I kept thinking about what I said in my review of Disney's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow earlier in the month. The way it's pretty much gateway horror, and when we read the story and watched the movie in elementary school, it was the first exposure to horror for a lot of kids. Not for me, obviously, but I still enjoyed having that horror element in the classroom. That got me thinking, for kids unlike me who were not watching horror movies at a young age, not only was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow gateway horror for them, but Halloween, the holiday in general, must have been. In fact, Halloween is probably the first exposure to horror for most kids. It's interesting for someone like me who has been watching horror films my whole life to think about that. When do other kids first experience horror? Well, my final review for the 31 Days connects that idea with Halloween and Sleepy Hollow. I watched The Tale of the Midnight Ride, the first episode of Season 3 of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Are You Afraid of the Dark, along with Halloween and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, was probably gateway horror for a lot of kids. Even though I was already watching horror films at that age, I still enjoyed this TV series. The Tale of the Midnight Ride was the most fitting episode to discuss today, because it's set on Halloween and based on the legend of Sleepy Hollow. The episode follows Ian Matthews, a new kid who moved to Sleepy Hollow. Outside the high school, he meets a girl named Katie, who is getting decorations prepared for the Halloween dance. The two hit it off immediately, and Ian offers to help her decorate. Katie's boyfriend, Brad, doesn't like this, and I guess you can't blame the guy. With that being said, Brad is a total jerk and begins threatening Ian. I'm sure you've figured it out by now. Ian is like the Ichabod Crane character, Katie is the Katrina, and Brad is Brom Bones. The Halloween dance arrives that night, and I love those decorations. Apparently, Katie and Ian did a great job. When Brad sees them together at the dance, he confronts Ian again. Brad tells Ian he must go through an initiation now that he has moved to Sleepy Hollow. Since it's Halloween night, he must cross the Bridge of Souls and retrieve the Headless Horseman's pumpkin. Rumor has it, the woods are not only haunted by the Headless Horseman, but by Ichabod Crane as well. Back in the 1700s, Ichabod chose the wrong path when he came to a fork in the road, and the rest is history. Now, Ian finds himself in the same dilemma. I'll leave it at that. This is obviously only a 30-minute episode, and that's with commercials, so I don't want to spoil the whole thing. You get the idea. This was a modern, or should I say, 90s interpretation of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's somewhat similar to The Hollow in that way, which also has high schoolers as the main characters. Watching this episode also had me wondering if this was the first exposure to the story for a lot of kids. I can't be certain every elementary school read and showed The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, like mine. So maybe for some kids, their first experience with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was The Tale of the Midnight Ride. It all goes back to my original point. Gateway horror and Halloween. As horror fans, most, if not all of us, are also Halloween fanatics. But most kids also love Halloween. It's not just the candy and the costumes, but that excitement, that thrill. It's sort of safe horror for those not quite ready to take the plunge. Now, obviously, there are people who don't celebrate Halloween, but for the most part, it's the holiday that makes horror universal. It's an accepted form of enjoying the macabre and celebrating the horrific. With Halloween, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and Are You Afraid of the Dark, many of us became the horror fans we are today. What was your first experience with horror? Was it Halloween, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, or something else entirely? And do you remember The Tale of the Midnight Ride from Are You Afraid of the Dark? Comment below and let me know. Thank you for watching my 31 Days of Horror. Have a safe and happy Halloween. Hit that thumbs up and be kind. Subscribe.